Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named American Horror Story, Season 10, Double Feature Part 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The second story, titled Death Valley, begins with a scene set in 1945, New Mexico. Housewife Maria has just finished preparing dinner and hastens to call her young son, who is playing alone outside, to come in and eat. But at that moment, the son suddenly notices a tornado forming in the nearby desert. Inside, Maria also realizes something is amiss when the lights in the house inexplicably start to flicker. The record player ceases to function, only to start spinning in reverse, and the wall clock begins to turn backward as well. Maria quickly looks out the window at her son, but in an instant, her son vanishes without a trace. Outside, the wind howls ferociously, and inside, the house shakes as if an earthquake has struck. As Maria reaches for the phone to call for help, she hears her son's voice on the other end, telling her not to worry. Just as Maria is about to ask where her son is, a mysterious force pins her to the ceiling. The boy then walks calmly back into the house with a voice that now sounds mechanical, like a robot's. He reassures his mother not to be afraid and asks her to take his hand. Suddenly, his eyes turn pure white. When the father returns home after late work, he finds the door ajar to a scene of utter disarray and his wife suspended in midair. As Maria opens her pure white eyes and flicks her wrist, the father is seized by an excruciating headache. And in the next instant, his head explodes into onion pieces. Over in California, President Eisenhower and his friends were reluctantly discussing political issues while playing golf. During their game, the president's advisor arrived with a report. The Air Force Base in California had been invaded by an unidentified flying object, which had since been shot down by an interceptor. Upon hearing this, the president decided to head to the scene immediately. Before departing, he went home to pack some essentials, but since the matter was a military secret, he could only deceive his wife, Mamie, by saying he was off to the base for a dental checkup. His astute wife sensed this was just an excuse, but due to her husband's position as president, she didn't press the matter further. Accompanied by a large security detail, the president arrived at the crash site of the unidentified aircraft and was startled by what he saw. The long-anticipated aliens had finally made their appearance. He immediately ordered the area to be cordoned off and the alien bodies to be transported back to the military base. As the president contemplated why the aliens had appeared here, soldiers suddenly discovered a naked woman with strange symbols on her back, hiding under a tree nearby. The woman identified herself as Amelia. When the president heard this name, he was extremely shocked. As a background here, Amelia Earhart was an American aviator and the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. In 1937, when she attempted her first round-the-world flight, she mysteriously disappeared over the Pacific Ocean, and her whereabouts remain unknown to this day. Back at the Air Force Base, Amelia detailed her experience to the president. Their radio had malfunctioned for no reason during the flight, followed by a complete failure of all their equipment. Then their plane began to fall continuously as everything around them turned white, and after that, she couldn't remember anything. Regarding the marks on her back, Amelia only mentioned they were caused by them and indicated that they sometimes used her as an experimental subject, inserting something into her sexy body. The president urgently asked who they were, but at that moment, Amelia suddenly became frantic, desperately seeking her flying companion. The staff quickly administered a sedative to Amelia, and their conversation was cut short. After stepping outside, an agent by the president's side asserted that the situation was impossible. If the woman before them truly was the aviator Amelia, she should be 60 years old by now and couldn't possibly look the way she did. The president then mentioned that his wife had greatly admired Amelia, and as it happened, there was a photograph of Amelia in his wife's office, a photograph he saw nearly every day. Therefore, the president was now convinced that the woman before them was indeed the long-lost Amelia. At that moment, a doctor emerged from the hospital ward and revealed that Amelia was 2 months pregnant. The group then moved to another ward where they were preparing to conduct an autopsy on the alien body they had found. The president and his entourage stood outside the ward, watching through the glass as the doctors began the procedure. When they opened up the alien's body, they discovered it was just an empty shell with nothing inside. Suddenly, something resembling a facehugger from the Alien movies sprang out and latched onto the doctor's face. When another doctor tried to remove the creature, both of their heads instantly exploded. The security guards quickly ushered the president away from the scene. However, at that moment, the previously mentioned Maria suddenly appeared, levitating midair, and with a raise of her hand, she caused the heads of her attackers to explode. Seeing this, the president immediately called for a ceasefire and stepped forward to identify himself, hoping to stop the aliens' attack and resolve the situation peacefully. The alien then addressed the president, indicating that it was he who should be listening to them. The scene shifts to a group of 4 friends who are gathered at a party. They started complaining about their terrible lives while finding that Jamie's situation is the most pitiful. Jamie complained that after enjoying some intimate time with her boyfriend, she shockingly discovered she's allergic to her partner's semen. Everyone expresses their sympathy upon hearing this unfortunate news. After dinner, everyone starts to play with their phones. The haughty girl, Kendall, quickly urges everyone to put down their devices, arguing that their dependence on phones stems from an inner anxiety, scientifically referred to as nomophobia. She shares her recent fascination with her teacher from an elective course called Technology in 50 Years. This teacher doesn't use a phone, a computer, nor the internet, and yet he never feels anxious. In the course, he told Kendall that it's because he refuses to be a slave to technology. So Kendall calls for everyone to try putting down their phones and using less tech, suggesting that they would all feel more relaxed. She then proposes a camping trip, without phones, of course. Everyone agrees to the idea enthusiastically and decides to camp in Joshua Tree National Park in the southeastern part of California. They pack their essentials, leaving their phones at home, and head out to camp in the desert. While the 4 are searching for a pond in the desert, the drug addict Troy notices that the landscape seems different from before. At the same time, they suddenly smell something strange. Investigating further, they come across several cow carcasses, all neatly bisected, with no blood around them. The daring Kendall touches one of the cows and sees its eye move, followed by a cow's moo, which terrifies everyone, prompting them to hurry back to camp to pack up and leave before dark. As night falls, they drive towards the nearest town at full speed. However, the car mysteriously stalls, and everything around them becomes eerily quiet. Then a blinding white light shines on them, slowly rising above their heads. At that moment, it seems an alien slowly approaches them. Kendall suddenly spots a mysterious tentacle wrapping around Jamie's neck. More tentacles reach forward, ensnaring Troy and his boyfriend, Cal. After the white light vanishes and they all wake from unconsciousness, they rush to start the car to escape. But then, Kendall realizes Jamie is missing, only to find her suddenly in front of the car. After slamming on the brakes, causing Jamie to faint, they quickly pull her into the car. They then notice something astonishing. Their positions in the car are completely different from when they started their trip. After everyone returned home, Kendall called her teacher. She was convinced that they had been abducted by aliens and sought his permission to use the computer and internet to research the incident. The teacher agreed and suggested that Kendall should eat something, but she replied that for some reason she felt nauseous and was suddenly overcome with the urge to vomit. She abruptly ended the call and rushed to the bathroom. Meanwhile, Jamie called Kendall to tell her that she had been vomiting all afternoon. Sensing something was off, they decided to meet up. However, the gay couple, Cal and Troy, experienced similar symptoms. After Jamie and Kendall met, a test revealed that they were both pregnant. Kendall insisted that the alien abduction must be the reason for their pregnancies. At that moment, Cal and Troy arrived at Kendall's place. After hearing that their symptoms were identical to hers, Kendall took out a pregnancy test, which astonishingly confirmed that the 2 men were also pregnant. The scene then shifts to 1963 when Eisenhower is no longer the president. He meets with a man who is actually the future President Nixon. Their conversation reveals that Eisenhower is going to meet with the incumbent President Kennedy to inform him about aliens, and most importantly, about a treaty that Americans had signed with the aliens. They then proceed to the White House to meet President Kennedy and hand over all the information about the aliens. Kennedy, after reviewing the material, is visibly upset. He is initially skeptical of what he sees, but above all, he cannot accept the treaty that allows Americans to be abducted and experimented on by aliens. Eisenhower explains that it is the sacrifice of these 5,000 people per year that allows the U.S. government to obtain advanced technology from the aliens, ensuring the safety of 190 million Americans. Afterward, Kennedy sought out his lover, Marilyn Monroe, and vented to her about the alien situation. To his surprise, Marilyn took the news quite lightly. It turned out she had known about such matters all along and had even experienced them firsthand. When she was young one night, she saw a teddy bear that didn't belong to her appear before her eyes. Suddenly, a blinding white light burst from outside the window, and as it vanished, the teddy bear's eyes turned alien-like. After she told her parents, they thought she was insane and sent her to a foster home. Back in the present, Monroe kept encouraging the president to go public with the alien affair, to let the American people know the truth. A few days later, in the dead of night, Eisenhower received an urgent call from Nixon. Nixon had heard that President Kennedy was gathering support to disclose the alien matter. Such a disclosure would have a very negative impact on Eisenhower and their Republican Party. They resolved that they must find a way to deal with the situation. A few days on, while Eisenhower was having breakfast with his wife Mamie, she mentioned how handy their new microwave oven was. Although the technology for the microwave, which came from the aliens, made her a bit nervous, she couldn't deny that it was truly remarkable and would definitely be accepted by the public. Suddenly, a news bulletin interrupted the television program. President Kennedy had been assassinated on the street. It seemed that Kennedy's death was facilitated by Eisenhower and Nixon to avoid making the alien intrusion public. The scene shifts to 9 years earlier, picking up where the last episode in 1954 left off. President Eisenhower, having encountered aliens earlier, is now in discussion with others about whether to sign a treaty drafted by the aliens. By now, everyone should know that the treaty involves trading human beings for alien technology. As the debate ensues, Maria, the alien who transformed, suddenly appears in the office. She states that she senses some resistance among the group, and to show goodwill, she brings a gift. She places a box on the table, which opens to reveal something resembling modern fiber optics. While this represents advanced technology for the Americans present, there are still those who stand in opposition, calling it a trap, and even attempting to shoot the alien. But as one might guess, they are promptly killed with their heads exploded. The alien continues to explain that their world is on the verge of destruction, and they need to find a new home. Earth, however, is unsuitable due to the presence of viruses, which is why they are creating hybrids of humans and aliens through experiments. Suddenly, the alien seems to leave Maria's body, and in the next moment, Maria is shot dead. Eisenhower then arrives at the lab where the pregnant Amelia seems to have given birth. It's now clear that she is one of the experiment subjects abducted by the aliens. However, a soldier reports that the offspring is a monster that killed everyone present. An enraged Eisenhower takes the soldier's handgun and, along with others, enters the lab to kill the newborn alien. Back at home, Eisenhower remains deeply conflicted about signing the treaty. Meanwhile, Mamie encourages him to sign, arguing that if the United States doesn't, the aliens will turn to the Soviets. Eisenhower, however, insists on giving it more thought to see if there is another way. The next day, Mamie brings in Vice President Nixon and shows him all the information about the aliens. After reviewing the files, Nixon is visibly sweating and wipes his brow with a handkerchief from the table. Mamie directly asks Nixon to help persuade Eisenhower. Nixon, with ambitions to be president one day, knows he can't let President Eisenhower be ruined by the current situation. He quickly goes to Eisenhower and tirelessly works to convince him to sign the treaty. As Eisenhower wonders how Nixon even knows about this, he notices the handkerchief in Nixon's hand. Confronting his wife, Eisenhower angrily asks why she told Nixon about the matter. The more she pushes for the treaty, the more suspicious he becomes. Out of options and angry, Mamie's voice changes, her eyes turn pure white, and she levitates. It turns out an alien has been inhabiting Mamie all along. The alien no longer hides its presence and directly threatens Eisenhower. If he doesn't sign the treaty, his wife will end up dying like Maria. The scene shifts back to the four friends. It's only been a day since they discovered they were all pregnant. Strangely, all four of their bellies appear to have grown significantly, as if they are about to give birth any moment. They rush to find Jamie's personal doctor, hoping an ultrasound might shed light on what exactly is going on in their stomachs. However, after examining them for a while, the doctor's expression turns grave. She says she needs to check something and abruptly runs out of the ward. In a panic, Kendall urges Troy to lie down for a prenatal exam. And there, on the ultrasound screen, is the distinct image of a fully formed male fetus. Troy anxiously asks how he's supposed to give birth to this giant baby and where it's even supposed to come out from. Meanwhile, the doctor who ran out is frantically calling other physicians for help. Suddenly, a van pulls up outside. A man dressed in black with sunglasses steps out, and without a word, he shoots the doctor who was on the phone. The four friends hear the gunshot, and at the same time, the man in black bursts in and injects them all with a sedative. When Kendall wakes up again, they find themselves in a mysterious place, all floating in midair. She loudly calls out to her friends, but then a woman in white appears and immediately silences her. Kendall bombards her with questions about where they are and what is happening to them. The The woman in white responds evasively, only mentioning that the gifts in their bellies are a chance to save a planet, but she's not referring to Earth. With a wave of her hand, she sends Kendall back into unconsciousness. Shortly after Kendall awoke again, she found herself in a place reminiscent of a restaurant, where most of the patrons sported large bellies. At that moment, Kendall noticed Steve Jobs, the future CEO of Apple, deep in conversation with a lady about life's aspirations. Interestingly, Jobs himself was not pregnant. Soon after, Kendall's 3 friends joined her at the restaurant, and a server brought over a jelly-like food. The woman who had been chatting with Jobs approached their table to strike up a conversation. She introduced herself as Calico and mentioned she had been brought to this place back in 1968. Although she didn't know who was behind her abduction, she was aware of their connection to the government. Since arriving, she seemed to have stopped aging. She explained that others leave after completing their mission. An anxious Troy hurriedly asked whether their memories would be erased after they give birth, allowing them to go home. Calico's response was cryptic, merely suggesting that life has its own path. At that point, a server brought over some pills for them to take. An angry Troy knocked the pills away, demanding answers to the burning question of how he was supposed to give birth. As the situation escalated, a man in black seized Troy and restrained him in an operating room. Once again, the woman in white appeared. A frantic Troy repeatedly asked how he was supposed to give birth. The woman in white slowly removed her mask, revealing a face that was half human, half alien. At that moment, Troy's stomach began to hurt terribly, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. The scene flashes back to 1954 during the presidency of Eisenhower. He was still grappling with the decision of whether to sign a treaty with the aliens. The alien script, resembling a mass of tadpoles, was showcased, possibly symbolizing the aliens' intention to integrate with humanity. After much deliberation, Eisenhower couldn't bring himself to sign the document. The aliens then presented a threat. If Americans didn't sign, they would offer their technology to the Soviet Union. Eisenhower questioned this, noting that signing could cost the lives of 5,000 Americans annually. Yet not signing might still lead to loss of American lives if the Soviets, strengthened by alien technology, became a major threat. The president reasoned that if signing or not signing the treaty both posed a threat to the lives of Americans, why was the treaty so imperative? The aliens clarified that the treaty served as a preventive measure. Should the Americans breach the agreement in the future, the aliens could publicly reveal the president's signature as evidence of a fair deal with the U.S. government, putting the onus of breach on the government. What's more, the treaty is a guarantee that the U.S. won't use alien technology against the aliens in the future. If Americans do turn alien technology against them, the aliens would have a justified reason to retaliate or even invade. This clause would serve as a legitimate pretext for the aliens to seize power in the future. Seeing the first threat ineffective, the aliens promptly resorted to a second one, which involved Eisenhower's wife. Mamie's eyes returned to normal, but blood began to stream from the corners, contorting her face in agony. Faced with this harrowing sight, Eisenhower felt compelled to sign the treaty. As soon as the aliens witnessed the successful signing, they promptly left Mamie's body. Fast forward to 3 years later in 1957. Since the aliens obtained the treaty, they had been abducting American citizens relentlessly, with a total of 298 abductions taking place. What infuriated President Eisenhower was the fact that, despite abducting so many people, the aliens had not responded with the advanced technology they had promised to the United States. Amid the complaints, the building began to shake, and a flash of white light streaked past the windows. The familiar child of the devil appeared, putting the entire White House on high alert. Possessing what seemed to be supernatural powers, the child of the devil could make guards fly away like Barbie dolls. He then made his way to the president's room to formally meet with Eisenhower. Introducing himself as Valiant Thor, he claimed to be the liaison sent by the aliens to communicate with the Americans. To prove his identity, he revealed the mechanical devices hidden beneath his scalp. This ties into an urban legend about the real Valiant Thor, supposedly a Venusian who arrived on Earth in 1957 and met with President Eisenhower. Legend has it that each of his hands had 6 fingers, his heart was exceptionally large, and his blood, like that of an octopus, contained copper oxide. His mission on Earth was to persuade humans to abandon nuclear weapons and promised to provide new clean energy sources and other technologies in exchange. However, the U.S. government at the time, concerned about the economy, declined Thor's assistance. Thor continued to work at the Pentagon until he returned to Venus in 1960. Returning to the story, Thor's visit was to honor the promise made by the aliens. He opened his briefcase to reveal an iPod inside. Thor explained that it was a handheld computing device, far more powerful than the IBM model located in the Pentagon, known as the world's first computer and equipped with a touchscreen. He suggested that one day this device would herald a new era for humanity, perhaps the era of the iPhone. Eisenhower then sought out Mamie, who was busy decorating the White House for Halloween. Previously, Halloween was a holiday celebrated by children, but she wished for adults to participate as well. Thus, she began to adorn the White House, a tradition that aligns with history. In fact, it was Eisenhower's wife who first decorated the White House for Halloween and hosted a party, a tradition that has continued with subsequent presidents such as Kennedy, Nixon, and up to Obama and Trump, who have all held Halloween parties during their presidencies. In the evening, Mamie had fallen asleep, and Eisenhower, reading the newspaper, read about a missing girl. At that moment, a strange noise came from the ventilation duct above him. Following the duct to the basement, behind a stack of boxes, he discovered a mysterious door. Accidentally, he activated a fingerprint device on the door which led to an elevator. Eisenhower descended 20 floors underground. As he exited the elevator, he heard a chicken scream. Approaching a window in a room, he was confronted by a man with a scarred face. Suddenly, Thor appeared and explained everything to Eisenhower. It turns out this place was where aliens conducted experiments, which had been established for several years to withstand nuclear radiation. Eisenhower was puzzled why he was not informed. Thor continued to explain that the aliens feared their true appearance might be too shocking for him, potentially causing him to terminate their treaty. Thor then showed Eisenhower many alien specimens, stating that these were in early developmental stages, created from a mix of human and alien genes, but they had not yet reached perfection. He mentioned that the place was now somewhat cramped. The next morning, Eisenhower and his wife were having breakfast. Mamie mentioned she wanted to host a lunch for all the female staff, allowing them to bring their children, and the children's game would be the familiar trick-or-treat. However, Eisenhower was troubled by what he had seen the night before, utterly surprised that aliens were conducting human experiments on American citizens. Mamie, seemingly unconcerned, suggested that since the aliens found the current space too cramped, they could be relocated to Nevada. Consequently, Eisenhower met with Thor and signed a new treaty, allotting land north of Las Vegas to the aliens for top-secret biological testing, naming the place Area 51. Afterwards, Eisenhower firmly told his staff that this matter must be kept absolutely confidential. At night, Eisenhower suddenly heard a strange noise coming from the ventilation duct. He followed the sound and came to a room where he was shocked to see his wife engaged in a smelly hormone yoga session with Thor. Overcome with anger, Eisenhower began to experience chest pains. Clutching his chest, he eventually passed out. When he awoke, he found himself lying in bed. Mamie unapologetically admitted what had just transpired with Thor. To her, Thor, being a robot, was no different than a massage wand. Her reason for this was revenge. During World War II, Eisenhower had an affair with a young woman behind her back. The background here is that during World War II, when Eisenhower was serving as a 5-star general in the U.S. Army in England, he fell in love at first sight with a local girl named Kay Summersby, and they had an affair. After the war, in order not to jeopardize his career, Eisenhower cut ties with her, referring to her only as a comrade in arms. In contrast, Summersby took their relationship very seriously. She even traveled to the United States after the war and waited outside the Pentagon for 6 hours just to see the president, but she never did. The scene shifts to 5 years later in 1962 at the FBI headquarters. Eisenhower and Nixon are watching a video of Marilyn Monroe, whose appearance they feel is a bit offhand. In the video, Marilyn is revealing the dirty dealings between the government and the aliens. Nixon is explaining to Eisenhower the gravity of the situation, but it's clear from his tone that what he's most worried about is not Eisenhower. It's that if the scandal leaks, it could affect his next presidential campaign. Soon after, Marilyn is alone at home drinking when the power suddenly goes out. She moves towards the window, but then an alien appears behind her. 2 men in black restrain her on the bed and force-feed her a whole bottle of sleeping pills from beside the bed, ensuring she would never wake up. This aligns with the real-life fact that Marilyn died from an overdose of sleeping pills. Afterwards, a drunk Nixon calls Kennedy to offer insincere condolences. Kennedy knows Nixon is involved in some way, but without evidence, he is powerless to act. Just as he's about to hang up, Nixon quickly reminds Kennedy to keep his mouth shut in the future and not to spill everything. A year later, in 1963, Nixon and Eisenhower, along with the then-President Johnson, arrived at Area 51. After greeting Johnson, Thor led the trio into their base. At that moment, the three men were stunned by the sight of an endless collection of alien specimens standing frozen on the spot. Fast forward to the present, the pregnant Troi is about to give birth. Theta, the half-human, half-alien woman, comes and uses her telepathy to calm Troi's mind. Then, with a laser scalpel, Theta performs a cesarean section on Troi's abdomen, revealing it is indeed a cesarean birth. A nurse by Troi's side retrieves something egg-like from his belly, with a baby clearly visible inside it. When the nurse cracks open the egg, out comes a baby with the large eyes characteristic of an alien. Both the nurse and Theta declare the child healthy, despite the presence of deformities, most notably the alien-like eyes. It seems the aliens aim to create perfect test subjects, indistinguishable in appearance from humans but able to communicate with alien minds. Upon witnessing the birth of his child, Troi continuously pleads with Theta through his thoughts to let him see his baby. However, the nurse suddenly stabs the infant's neck and throws it into a water tank. The agony inflicted upon the child is also felt by Troi, who clutches his neck and attempts to intervene, but is rendered unconscious by Theta's psychic control. A week later, Troi has recovered and is reunited with three friends. He tearfully recounts the murder of his child. It turns out that deep down, both he and his boyfriend Cal had always longed to have their own children, making the loss profoundly devastating. The group then discusses their determination to escape from this place. At that moment, another experimental subject, Calico, joins the conversation, urging everyone to accept the reality and informing them that escape is impossible from this notorious Area 51. Curious, Troi asks Calico how many children she has given birth to since her arrival. Calico reveals that since being captured in 1969, she's had to bear 2 to 3 children a year. She shares the survival rule of the place: don't regard the beings you give birth to as children, but as trash. Troi immediately protests, declaring he could never become as heartless as Calico. In response, Calico argues that she isn't heartless, she has simply adapted. Afterward, Calico, accompanied by 4 children, arrived at a very special place, which is the set of the American moon landing film from years ago. Calico continued to explain that 50 years ago, the U.S. government faked the moon landing, and it was that year she was abducted and brought here. The scene flashes back to 1969. At that time, Calico was working as a waitress in a bar. One day in a private room, she saw 2 men she recognized instantly as Armstrong and Aldrin, the astronauts from the American moon landing. Later, she approached them deliberately, and after getting them drunk, they admitted that the moon landing was a hoax, including the famous line, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," which was scripted in advance. However, that same night, after a passionate encounter, a group of men in black appeared and abducted Calico. After that, she was brought here. When she woke up, her intention was to look for a way out, but she inadvertently ran into the moon landing studio and saw the director at the time, Stanley Kubrick. The experiment subject Kendall then asked why they would film a fake one since the US had already collaborated with aliens and had sufficient technology to land on the moon. Calico explained that a real moon landing was too expensive and filming a fake video was easier, cheaper, and garnered more attention. It was in the following year that Calico lost her first child. For many years since, she has been continuously experiencing the pain of giving birth to children and then having them taken away and killed. After sharing this, Calico asked everyone to calm down, as she needed to continue her conversation with Steve Jobs. After hearing Calico's story, everyone fell silent and comforted each other by holding hands. A few days later, Cal began to feel pain in his stomach, indicating the time for childbirth was near. He called his boyfriend Troi, hoping Troi could help deliver the baby because he didn't want the aliens to take his child away. They went to the moon landing studio where Troi found a scalpel. After encouraging Cal, he first asked Cal to bite on a towel to prevent screaming later. Then he cut open Cal's stomach and removed the egg inside. After cracking the egg, the child emerged halfway and seemed normal, which made them both very happy. But the next second, the lower half of the child's body appeared, resembling an octopus with very sharp teeth. It instantly latched onto Cal's head and began biting voraciously. The scene shifts to Richard Nixon's presidency in 1972. At this time, a large number of Americans who opposed the Vietnam War gathered outside the White House. They were protesting Nixon's decision to increase troop deployments to Vietnam. Facing the throngs of anti-war demonstrators, an infuriated Nixon declares within the White House that the Vietnam War must be stopped. However, the alien liaison, Thor, counters by asserting that the war is of great importance to them. It turns out that the Vietnam War, instigated by the United States, was actually planned in conjunction with extraterrestrials. The purpose was to distract the American public with the war so that they would not notice the people being abducted by aliens and disappearing without a trace. An anxious Nixon quickly inquires when the aliens' experiments would be completed. Thor indicates that they anticipate their first perfect test subject will be created in 2021, 50 years later. Of course, everyone knows that the Vietnam War could not possibly last for 50 years, so the clever aliens had already prepared a slew of other distractions to divert the attention of the American public in the future. After Thor's departure, Nixon's aide, Henry Kissinger, suddenly feels discomfort in his eye. He rushes outside, and it becomes apparent that the skin at the corner of Kissinger's eyes, as well as his tongue, bear a striking resemblance to those of a lizard. These clues suggest that Kissinger may be one of the legendary lizard people. This urban legend was first mentioned by British conspiracy theorist David Icke in his 1999 book, The Biggest Secret. He claimed that these creatures are reptilian humanoid beings from the Alpha Draconis star system in the constellation Draco. According to the author's description, many world leaders are related to lizard people, including the Rothschild family, the Bush family, and of course, Kissinger. The scene then flashes back 3 years earlier, where Eisenhower lying sick in bed, his health failing. His wife Mamie is by his side. Eisenhower watches news reports about the Vietnam War on television and realizes that it's all an alien conspiracy. Reflecting on the actions of the aliens over the years towards the American people, he deeply regrets having signed the treaty with them. It is at this moment that Eisenhower sees Kissinger giving a speech. He urgently reminds Mamie that there are not only aliens like Thor on Earth, but also another kind that has been living among humans for a long time, the lizard people, represented by Kissinger. Eisenhower knows this because the aliens accidentally abducted a lizard person while kidnapping Americans. At the time, the aliens did not inform the U.S. government and instead secretly disposed of the body. They did not want the humans to know that they also had competitors on Earth. After hearing all this, Mamie seems unconcerned, indicating that the only thing she cares about is her birthday parties, Halloween parties, and other social events. She wants to bring back a forgotten holiday, Evacuation Day, to everyone's attention. However, Eisenhower doubts the holiday's potential to gain popularity. Indeed, the holiday hasn't become widespread nowadays. Eisenhower continues to wallow in self-pity, constantly saying he should be dead, and this daily negativity makes Mamie very uncomfortable. So, Mamie calls Thor for help. Thor suggests they could take Eisenhower to Area 51, where he could live forever. However, Eisenhower confesses that he felt as though he died when he signed the treaty, and that he no longer wants to live in this world. After this, Eisenhower notices something unusual about Mamie and Thor's relationship, and told them they deserved each other before exiting the world. After kissing Eisenhower goodbye, Mamie tells her massage stick Thor that she doesn't want to end up like Eisenhower. She wants to keep living in this world. The scene shifts back to Nixon in the year 1972. Nixon is drinking again when an agent named Gordon Liddy comes to report. Nixon amiably invites Gordon to sit and then shares his plan. Nixon believes that he is the scapegoat for the alien treaty and fears that if the public finds out about it, he will be the first to take the fall. With anti-war sentiment growing, he is increasingly afraid that the treaty will become public knowledge. So he needs Gordon to sneak into Thor's office at the Watergate complex and find out the aliens' future plans. This is how it leads to the infamous Watergate scandal. After Nixon became president, he wanted to be re-elected. His strategy wasn't to ensure prosperity and peace for the United States, but to take a crooked path by suppressing his opponents, the Democratic Party. He arranged for people to break into the Democratic Party's office in the middle of the night to install listening devices and steal information. The office was in the Watergate building in Washington, D.C., hence the name Watergate Scandal. Nixon's men were caught installing the devices by a security guard. Nixon tried to distance himself from the incident and managed to win re-election. However, due to the Democratic Party's retaliation and continuous leaks to the media, the scandal was eventually exposed, forcing Nixon to resign and making him the first president in U.S. history to do so voluntarily. Rumor has it that because the Democratic Party's office was opposite the Watergate Hotel, a guest who couldn't sleep that night went for a stroll and happened to see several suspicious people with flashlights in the Democratic office. This may remind the audience of a scene in the movie Forrest Gump. In this incident, Gordon Liddy is one of the 5 people who were sent to install the listening devices. Returning to the story, in a parking lot, a man named Bob Woodward appears. He is a reporter for the Washington Post, the same one who exposed the Watergate scandal. To his surprise, he meets with Mamie. Mamie tells Bob she can share everything with him, but on one condition: her name must not be mentioned. She prefers to be referred to as Deep Throat. Historically, there indeed was an FBI agent who leaked information to the media under the alias Deep Throat, motivated by a previous grudge against Nixon. Back to the story, Mamie later finds Thor and tells him that she has met with the reporter 3 times. The reporter is thoroughly convinced that the break-in was at the Democratic Party's office, not Thor's. Mamie's leaks are meant to distract from Nixon's actual target of investigation, which is the aliens. Mamie also poses 2 questions. First, why not simply eliminate Nixon? And second, even if they discredit Nixon now, he might still reveal the alien affair after his presidency. Thor responds that too many politicians have mysteriously disappeared lately. Discrediting Nixon would be more effective than making him vanish. Regarding the second question, Thor cryptically assures her not to worry, implying they have plans to remind Nixon who really is pulling the strings. The scene then switches to Nixon and Kissinger praying in the White House. Kissinger's expression is noticeably off, but Nixon does not catch on. After praying, Nixon asks Kissinger for advice, as everyone now wants him to resign. Kissinger suggests that resigning might indeed be the best option. Nixon is about to confide in Kissinger about the aliens and the treaty, but Kissinger, sensing his cover might be blown, quickly finds an excuse to leave the office. After Kissinger's departure, Nixon repeatedly tells himself that he cannot resign. Then, in a flash of bright light, aliens appear before Nixon and whisk him away, stripping him of his clothes and strapping him to an operating table. The next day, Nixon publicly announces his resignation. Mamie and Thor, watching on television, are elated. Mamie admits that with Nixon's issue resolved, she is considering stepping back from the historical stage since she has achieved all her goals, having promoted various holidays. Now, she just wishes for Thor to grant her the ability to live forever. The drama is vague about Nixon's exact ordeal, merely hinting through Thor's comment that some humans have extreme reactions to simple medical procedures, which possibly indicates that the aliens may have transformed Nixon into a reptile-like being. That way, even if Nixon later speaks about the aliens, no one would believe him. The scene is set in 1979, where Mamie faked news of her death to the public, but in truth, she and Thor had reached Area 51 and entered an alien base. It was there that Mamie met the experimental subject Calico, who recognized her as the First Lady and incessantly expressed her admiration, thus beginning their friendship. Fast forward to the modern storyline, several guards were searching the alien base and stumbled into Mamie's room. An irritated Mamie demanded to know what they were doing. The guards apologetically muttered about an unauthorized death and hastily left. The guards then discovered the bodies of Carl and Troy in a lunar module studio. As they investigated the scene, one guard was suddenly attacked by a facehugger. The others promptly dealt with the creature, and in the process, they killed the afflicted guard. The hybrid alien Theta arrived on the scene, furious because it had been 2 life cycles since they'd seen such a mutation, and yet the guards had killed it outright. In her anger, Theta ordered the old guards to be executed. At that moment, Jamie and Kendall in their room heard the announcement calling everyone to the cafeteria for inspection. Finding Troy and Carl absent, they went to the lunar module studio and found their bodies. Suddenly, they experienced severe abdominal pain as if about to give birth. Theta appeared, escorting them to the surgery room, and first calmed them telepathically, as she had done with Troy. She revealed that the previously born specimen was the closest to perfection they'd seen in nearly 60 years, and that one of the children Kendall and Jamie were about to bear would be the perfect being the aliens desired. Jamie was the first to give birth, which appeared to be normal. However, after the birth, Theta shook her head at the newborn, indicating it wasn't the perfect specimen. Knowing the outcome of the baby, Theta then coldly ordered a nurse to kill Jamie as well. Subsequently, it was Kendall's turn. Without needing much thought, Kendall gave birth and Theta was overjoyed. She declared that this child was the perfect hybrid they had long been seeking. After setting the child aside, Theta told Kendall that they no longer had any use for her. In a swift act, she decapitated Kendall and instructed the attending nurse to preserve Kendall's body, which was, to them, a perfect birthing machine. The nurse then brought a metal head with a tube-like control mechanism and attached it directly to Kendall's body, turning her into a sort of cyborg. The next day, Calico celebrated Mamie's birthday with her, but Mamie's smile was one of fatigue. She didn't bother making a wish and blew out the candles directly. It turned out that the immortal Mamie had grown tired of the monotonous life there. She longed to create new stories and new holidays, but she felt powerless to do so in her current environment. Meanwhile, they noticed that everyone was celebrating the news of the birth of the first perfect hybrid. However, Mamie's expression was gravely serious. She quickly found Thor and inquired about the aliens' next plans. Thor revealed that they intended to breed the perfect hybrids en masse until they filled the world. Mamie was puzzled by this filling, but Thor went on to disclose their true intention, saying that the aliens planned to breed a vast number of perfect hybrids to take over Earth. Of course, some humans who had made significant contributions to the aliens would be spared. At that moment, Mamie recalled her husband's warning not to trust aliens easily, but it seemed too late for any precautions. Further, Thor revealed that they had already signed a treaty with the lizard people to share Earth in the future, admiring each other's qualities and advanced technologies. In contrast, humans had nothing to offer. An angry Mamie had no choice but to seek help from Theta, who was half human, half alien. She first hoped to see the newly born perfect hybrid. It was noticeable that the child's eyes were slightly larger than those of a normal human. Mamie commented on the beauty of the child, but then she was startled by the sight of the cyborg. Theta explained that this cyborg should not be seen as a person, but as a machine. An upset Mamie asserted that humans are not machines and should not be exploited. Theta countered that humans had already relinquished most of their control to machines, implying a critique of modern society where people's decisions are heavily influenced by devices like smartphones. Mamie then reminded Theta that she had once said she admired Mamie's husband, Eisenhower, and that he would never want to see humanity destroyed. Theta was taken aback, realizing she was unaware of the impending doom of mankind. Mamie then sought out Calico, hoping Calico would join her in resisting the alien scheme. Upon hearing this, Calico felt that just the two of them stood no chance against the aliens. Mamie continued to explain that they didn't need to take on everyone. Just removing the baby and the mother would thwart the aliens' 60 years of efforts, at least buying humanity more time and awakening them. Besides, they weren't alone. Mamie led Calico and Theta to the birthing operating room. Inside, Kendall's body was nurturing a second child. The aliens had shortened the breeding cycle. After Mamie rallied them once more, she picked up a scalpel and approached the perfect hybrid. But as she was about to strike the infant, Theta suddenly turned on her. It turned out that although Theta was a combination of human and alien and had a human side, she always felt that her human side was her greatest shame. She believed humans were extremely selfish, and even if aliens chose to coexist with humans, deep down, humans would never truly accept them. This could be seen as a satire of mainstream society's attitude towards certain minority groups. Superficial acceptance masked an inability to fully embrace them. At that moment, a controlled Mamie called out desperately to Calico for help, while Theta told Calico that after years of helping the aliens bear children, they would reward her by letting her raise the perfect hybrid. Calico thought about it and slowly approached Mamie, indicating she felt Theta was right. She had seen the good and the evil in humanity and thought it was time to give others a chance. Then, with a raise of her hand, Theta blew up Mamie's head. At that moment, the cyborg gave birth to a second perfect hybrid, which marks the end of the whole drama. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.